Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Jeremy Gates had always believed in absolutes. Black and white, right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal. These weren't just concepts to him. They were the bedrock upon which he'd built his life, his marriage, and his service to his country. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base in Afghanistan as Jeremy adjusted his scope for the third time. His spotter, Corporal Sam Garrett, lay beside him on the rocky outcrop, scanning the valley below through high-powered binoculars. "Targets moving toward the compound," Sam whispered. "Winds picking up from the southwest." Jeremy's breathing steadied as he'd trained it to do countless times before. 15 years of military service had honed him into something beyond human, a precision instrument of death. His reputation preceded him in every theater of operation. Jeremy Gates never missed, and Jeremy Gates never forgot. Back home in North Carolina, his wife Christina Gates was living a life that would soon shatter Jeremy's world of absolutes. She'd married him when he was just a young Marine, drawn to his intensity and unwavering principles. But 15 years of deployments, missed birthdays, and lonely nights had worn down her patience like water against stone. Christina stood in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, whispering to William Hogan, a successful contractor she'd met at their daughter's school function. What had started as innocent conversations about home renovations had evolved into something that would destroy everything Jeremy held sacred. "Bill, I can't keep doing this," Christina said, glancing toward the stairs where their 12-year-old daughter Leah was supposedly sleeping. "Jeremy comes back in 3 weeks." "Leave him." Bill's voice was smooth, convincing. "You deserve better than a man who's married to his rifle more than his wife." Christina had heard the stories other military wives shared in hushed tones. Jeremy's reputation wasn't limited to his marksmanship. He was known for his absolute intolerance of betrayal. She'd seen what happened to soldiers under his command who'd violated trust. They were transferred, demoted, or worse, simply disappeared from his circle forever. But love, or what she mistook for love, made her reckless. That same night, 8,000 miles away, Jeremy completed his mission with surgical precision. As they packed their gear, Sam noticed something different in his friend's demeanor. "Everything all right, Gate?" Sam used Jeremy's nickname, earned for his ability to close every door on a target. "Just thinking about home," Jeremy replied, his voice carrying an edge that Sam had learned to recognize. It was the same tone Jeremy used before eliminating a high-value target. What Jeremy didn't know was that his neighbor, retired Marine Blake Mendoza, had been keeping an eye on his house as promised. Blake had served under Jeremy in Iraq and owed him his life. He'd noticed the pattern. The same contractor's truck appearing in Jeremy's driveway every Tuesday and Thursday, staying for hours while Jeremy's wife sent Leah to her friend's house. Blake sat in his garage, wrestling with loyalty and duty. He'd taken a bullet meant for Jeremy in Fallujah, and Jeremy had carried him 2 miles to safety under enemy fire. But telling a man like Jeremy about his wife's betrayal, Blake knew it wouldn't just end a marriage. It would end lives. Meanwhile, Christina had grown bolder. She'd started letting Bill stay overnight when Jeremy's deployment was extended. Bill Hogan was everything Jeremy wasn't. Smooth-talking, always present, and completely uninterested in concepts like honor or loyalty. He saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. "We should tell him together," Christina said one evening as Bill poured wine. "Make it clean." Bill laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Clean? Honey, there's nothing clean about this. Your husband is a trained killer who spent his entire adult life in war zones. When he finds out, and he will find out, he's not going to want a conversation." The truth was, Bill had researched Jeremy extensively. He knew about the incident in Syria, where Jeremy had tracked down and eliminated 3 insurgents who'd killed his team medic, not as part of any official mission, but as personal vengeance. The military had covered it up, but the story lived on in whispered conversations among special operations personnel. Young Leah Gates moved through the house like a ghost, understanding more than her parents realized. She'd inherited her father's observational skills and her mother's emotional intelligence. She knew about Bill, knew about the lies, and felt the weight of secrets crushing her small shoulders. At school, she excelled in everything she touched, driven by a desperate need to make her father proud. She learned that her daddy was a hero, that other kids' fathers looked up to him, that he was someone special. The contradiction between that hero and the man her mother was betraying toward her young heart. The first crack in Jeremy's foundation came through an encrypted message from Blake. 3 words: need to talk. Jeremy stared at the screen, knowing that Blake would only reach out like this for something serious. Blake wasn't the type for casual check-ins or small talk. As Jeremy prepared for what he thought would be his return to a loving family, Christina was making plans that would set in motion a chain of events leading to destruction. She'd found an apartment, consulted a divorce lawyer, and convinced herself that Jeremy would accept it rationally. She couldn't have been more wrong. The second Jeremy read Blake's message, he felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. The same feeling he got when acquiring a target. His world of absolutes was about to be tested, and Jeremy Gates had never been a man to compromise on his principles. 5,000 miles away, in a house that had once symbolized everything he fought to protect, the woman who'd sworn to love and honor him was planning the ultimate betrayal. And their daughter, caught in the crossfire, was about to learn that some fathers never forgive and some men never forget. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The Carolina heat hit Jeremy like a wall as he stepped off the transport plane at Fort Bragg. 3 weeks early, thanks to Blake's cryptic message and Jeremy's accumulated leave time. He'd told no one he was coming home. Not Christina, not Leah, not even his commanding officer knew the real reason for his sudden return. Blake Mendoza waited in the parking lot, his weathered face bearing the weight of unwelcome knowledge. The 2 men embraced briefly, military precision even in their personal moments. "How bad is it?" Jeremy asked, settling into Blake's pickup truck. Blake handed him a manila envelope. "Photos, dates, times." "I'm sorry, brother." Jeremy's hands remained steady as he opened the envelope, but Blake could see the change in his eyes, from human warmth to something arctic and calculating. The photos showed Christina and Bill Hogan in various compromising situations, entering and leaving the house, kissing in the driveway. Bill's truck parked overnight when Leah was at sleepovers. "How long?" Jeremy's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. 6 months that I know of. Maybe longer. Jeremy studied each photograph with the same methodical attention he applied to intelligence briefings. "The daughter? She knows. Smart kid, too smart for her own good. I've seen her watching from her bedroom window when they think she's asleep." That last detail hit Jeremy harder than anything else. His princess, his little girl, forced to witness her mother's betrayal and carry that burden alone. Something inside Jeremy's chest began to crystallize into something harder than diamond and infinitely more dangerous. "Tell me about him." Blake reached into the glove compartment and produced a second file. William Hogan, 42, divorced twice, owns Hogan Construction, has a reputation for chasing married women. Some rumors about him getting physical with his last ex-wife, but nothing that stuck in court. Jeremy memorized every detail: home address, work schedule, known associates, financial situation. His military training had taught him that intelligence was the foundation of any successful operation. "There's something else," Blake said, his voice heavy. "Word is Christina's been telling people you're unstable. PTSD, anger issues, not safe around Leah. Building a case for sole custody." The temperature in the truck seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jeremy's expression never changed, but Blake had seen that look before, right before Jeremy eliminated a target who'd been selling information to insurgents. "She wants to paint me as the villain," Jeremy said, more to himself than to Blake. "Make herself the victim. Gate, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking my wife has declared war on everything I am and everything I built." Jeremy closed the files and handed them back. Wars have consequences. That evening, Jeremy parked down the street from his own house and watched. It was Thursday, and according to Blake's surveillance, that meant Bill would be there. Sure enough, at 7:47 p.m., a silver Toyota Tacoma pulled into his driveway. Through his scope, the same one he'd used to eliminate targets thousands of miles away, Jeremy watched his wife welcome another man into their home. He watched them move through rooms he'd painted, kiss in the kitchen where he'd made breakfast for Leah, disappear into the bedroom where he'd once held Christina through nightmares about his deployments. But it was when he saw Leah's shadow pass by her bedroom window that Jeremy felt something fundamental break inside him. His daughter was home, forced to listen to her mother's betrayal happening downstairs. Jeremy's phone buzzed. A text from Christina, "Miss you, baby. 2 more weeks feels like forever. Leah, send her love." He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Miss you too. Can't wait to be home." The lie tasted like poison, but it was strategically necessary. If Christina knew he was home early, she might accelerate her timeline. Jeremy needed time to plan, to prepare, to ensure that when he moved, it would be decisive and final. Over the next 3 days, Jeremy conducted surveillance with military precision. He learned Bill's routine, mapped his movements, identified his vulnerabilities. He discovered that Bill had a gambling problem, owed money to dangerous people, and had a history of violence against women that was carefully hidden behind lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. More importantly, Jeremy uncovered Christina's plan through careful social engineering, a skill he'd learned in intelligence training. He accessed her email and discovered communications with her divorce attorney. The strategy was exactly what Blake had warned him about. Paint Jeremy as an unstable veteran, claim fear for her and Leah's safety, and seek full custody with restricted visitation. The attorney had even suggested getting a restraining order based on verbal threats that Christina could claim Jeremy had made. It was a complete fabrication, but Jeremy knew how these cases went. The system was designed to err on the side of caution, and a decorated veteran with PTSD claims against him would be presumed guilty until proven innocent. But what cut deepest was finding the emails between Christina and her sister, Rosa Wallace, discussing how to handle Leah during the divorce. "She's daddy's little girl right now," Christina had written, "but she'll understand when she's older. Bill can be a good father figure if we do this right." Jeremy read that email 3 times, each reading increasing his rage. They were planning to replace him, to erase his relationship with his daughter and rebuild her loyalty around their new family structure. That night, Jeremy sat in a hotel room and made a list. Not a list of targets. That would come later. This was a list of everything he'd lost and everything he stood to lose. His marriage, his home, his daughter's respect, his reputation, his future. Then he made a second list. Everyone who had betrayed him and everyone who had enabled that betrayal. Christina's name was at the top, followed by Bill Hogan. But there were others. Christina's sister who had encouraged the affair, the divorce attorney who was helping build false allegations, even some of their mutual friends who had known about the affair and said nothing. Jeremy Gates had spent 15 years protecting people who had never appreciated the sacrifice. He'd killed enemies of his country, saved the lives of his fellow soldiers, and maintained a code of honor that most people couldn't even comprehend. Now, those same people had declared war on him. As he cleaned his service weapon, a ritual that had become meditative over the years, Jeremy felt the cold certainty settle into his bones. This wouldn't be a divorce. This wouldn't be a custody battle. This would be a reckoning. And Jeremy Gates had never lost a war. Chapter 3. The Call to War. Jeremy had been home for exactly 72 hours when his phone rang. The call that would transform him from betrayed husband to predator. The call that would prove to everyone involved that some men should never be pushed beyond their limits. He was sitting in his rental car outside Leah's school, watching her through the fence as she played with her friends during recess. She looked so small, so innocent, carrying the weight of adult secrets on her 12-year-old shoulders. Jeremy had been planning his approach carefully. When to reveal himself, how to extract Leah from the toxic environment Christina had created, how to protect his daughter while dismantling his enemies. The phone's ringtone cut through his thoughts like a blade. "Mr. Gates?" This is Dr. Sarah Chun from Cape Fear Valley Emergency Department. Your daughter Leah has been brought in with facial injuries. Jeremy's world tilted. What happened? Sir, I need you to come in immediately. Leah has suffered a broken jaw and some dental trauma. The police are here, and there are some circumstances we need to discuss. Jeremy was already moving, engine roaring to life. What circumstances? Where's her mother? Mrs. Gates is here as well. Sir, the injuries appear to be the result of domestic violence. Leah's stepfather. He's not her stepfather. The words came out like ice. I'm her father. There was a pause on the line. Ah, yes, sir. The man she's been living with, William Hogan, allegedly struck her. She's asking for you. Jeremy disconnected the call and drove toward the hospital with the same focused intensity he'd once used to navigate through hostile territory. His mind had shifted into combat mode, processing information and formulating responses with mechanical precision. He arrived at the emergency department and immediately spotted Christina in the waiting area, crying into her phone. Bill Hogan stood beside her, his knuckles showing fresh scrapes, trying to look concerned while his eyes darted toward the exits. Jeremy entered the hospital like death himself. His presence seemed to suck the energy from the room. Other people instinctively moved away from him, sensing something primal and dangerous in his movements. Christina looked up and her face went white. Jeremy? You're not supposed to be back for her. Where is she? Room 4, Christina stammered. But Jeremy, you need to understand. He walked past her without another word. Behind him, he heard Bill's voice, loud enough to be intentionally overheard. This is exactly what I was talking about, Christina. Look at him. That's not normal behavior. Jeremy stopped walking. Blake Mendoza, who had been following Jeremy at a distance, later said that he'd seen men die with less warning than what happened in that moment. Jeremy turned around slowly, his eyes fixed on Bill Hogan with the same expression he'd worn while acquiring targets through his scope. Excuse me. Jeremy's voice was conversational, almost friendly. Bill, emboldened by being in a public place, stepped forward. I said that's not normal behavior. Storming in here like some kind of what? Jeremy moved closer, and despite being surrounded by people, the space around them seemed to become a vacuum of tension. Like some kind of unstable vet with anger issues, Bill finished, clearly pleased with himself for getting the words out. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. Interesting perspective from the man who just broke my daughter's jaw. Now wait Dr. Chun? Jeremy turned to the emergency room physician who had been approaching. What exactly happened to my daughter? Dr. Chun glanced nervously between Jeremy and Bill. Based on Leah's account and the injury pattern, she was struck in the face with considerable force. She says she was smiling at a waiter during dinner, and Mr. Hogan became angry, stating that her smile belonged to him and that she was being inappropriate. The silence that followed was deafening. Jeremy processed this information with the same methodical approach he used for mission briefings. His 12-year-old daughter had been brutalized by his wife's lover for the crime of smiling at a stranger. Where is she now? Room 4. She's been asking for you specifically. She seems afraid of Mr. Hogan. Jeremy walked toward room 4, leaving Christina and Bill in the waiting area. Behind him, he could hear Christina hissing at Bill. You told me she fell down the stairs. You told me it was an accident. It was an accident. Bill's voice was defensive. She pushed my buttons, you know. She's too friendly with men. It's not appropriate for a girl her age. Jeremy froze outside room 4, his hand on the door handle. His daughter was too friendly with men. Leah was 12 years old, and this monster was sexualizing her natural childhood behavior. Inside the room, Leah lay on the hospital bed, her face swollen and bruised, her jaw wired shut. When she saw Jeremy, tears immediately started flowing. Daddy. Her voice was muffled by the medical equipment, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Jeremy sat beside her bed and took her small hand in his. I'm here, princess. Daddy's here. He said the smile belonged to him. She whispered, but I was just being polite to the waiter like you taught me. Something inside Jeremy's chest turned to molten steel. His daughter was apologizing for being polite. She was explaining herself to him as if she'd done something wrong by being kind to a stranger. "You did nothing wrong," Jeremy said, his voice gentle despite the rage building inside him. "Nothing at all. You're perfect, and Daddy is going to fix this." Leah squeezed his hand. "Are you going to leave again?" "No, baby. Daddy's not going anywhere." A nurse entered to check Leah's vitals, and Jeremy stepped into the hallway to make a phone call. He dialed Blake's number. "Blake, I need you to listen carefully. I want you to go to my house and wait for me there. If Christina and that piece of garbage come home, you watch them. You don't interfere, but you watch everything." "Kate, what are you planning?" Jeremy looked through the window at his broken daughter. "I'm planning to teach some people about consequences." He hung up and called his commanding officer, Colonel Spencer Cooper. "Cooper, sir, it's Gates. I need emergency family leave extended indefinitely. There's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" "My daughter's in the hospital. Domestic violence. I need to handle some things." There was a pause. Colonel Cooper had served with Jeremy for 8 years and knew him better than most. "Jeremy, whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking about being a father, sir. That's all." "The kind of thinking that keeps you out of prison, Jeremy. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." But as Jeremy hung up the phone and looked back at his daughter, he knew that Colonel Cooper's warning had come too late. The moment Bill Hogan had put his hands on Leah, he'd declared war on the wrong man. Jeremy Gates had spent 15 years learning how to wage war in foreign countries against foreign enemies. Now he was going to bring those skills home. And unlike his enemies overseas, Christina and Bill would never see him coming. Chapter 4. Reconnaissance and Rage. Jeremy spent the night in Leah's hospital room, watching her sleep fitfully despite the pain medication. Every small whimper, every unconscious wince sent fresh waves of rage through his system. By morning, he had mentally cataloged every detail of her injuries and begun constructing a detailed plan for retribution. Dr. Chun arrived for morning rounds, followed closely by Detective Rosa Wallace, ironically, Christina's sister, who had been assigned to the domestic violence case. The family connection created an immediate conflict of interest that Jeremy noted for future exploitation. "Mr. Gates," Detective Wallace began, her voice carefully professional despite the obvious discomfort, "I need to get your statement about the incident." "My statement is simple," Jeremy replied, never taking his eyes off Leah. "A grown man broke my 12-year-old daughter's jaw because she smiled at a stranger." "What's your plan to address that?" "Well, we've spoken with Mr. Hogan, and he claims it was an accident. He says Leah fell down some stairs and—" "Detective Wallace." Jeremy finally looked at her, and she took an involuntary step backward. "Are you telling me that you believe a 12-year-old girl fell downstairs and somehow managed to break her jaw in a pattern consistent with being punched by a right-handed adult male?" Dr. Chun cleared her throat. "The injury pattern is definitely consistent with blunt force trauma, not a fall. The angle and severity suggest deliberate violence." Detective Wallace shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hogan is claiming that Leah has behavioral problems, that she's been acting out since learning about the divorce, and that—" "Stop talking." Jeremy's voice carried the kind of authority that had commanded troops in combat zones. "My daughter is lying in a hospital bed with a broken jaw, and you're standing here repeating the lies of the man who put her there. I want to know what charges you're filing and when you're filing them." "Sir, these cases are complicated, with the divorce proceedings and the custody situation." "This isn't a custody situation. This is an assault on a child. File charges or get out of my daughter's room." After Detective Wallace left, promising to continue the investigation, Jeremy called Sam Garrett, his former spotter who now worked private security in Charlotte. "Sam, I need a favor. Deep background check on William Hogan. I want everything: criminal history, civil suits, financial records, medical records, employment history, everything." "Kate, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to be very thorough." Within 6 hours, Sam had delivered a comprehensive dossier on Bill Hogan that painted the picture of a predator who had been carefully managing his public image. 3 previous domestic violence complaints, all mysteriously dropped when the women involved received sudden financial settlements. A sealed juvenile record that Sam's contacts suggested involved sexual misconduct. significant gambling debts to some very dangerous people in Charlotte. But the most interesting discovery was Bill's business relationship with City Council member Arthur Norris, who had been steering municipal contracts toward Hogan Construction in exchange for cash payments. The arrangement was documented in emails that Sam's cybersecurity contact had acquired through methods Jeremy didn't need to know about. Jeremy studied the information while sitting beside Leah's bed. His daughter was awake now, sipping liquid nutrition through a straw, her eyes following his every movement. "Daddy, what are you reading?" "Just some work stuff, princess." "How are you feeling?" "It hurts, but—" "Daddy, I heard Mommy talking to Bill. They're saying you're going to be in trouble, that you might not be allowed to see me anymore." Jeremy set down the papers and gave Leah his full attention. "What exactly did you hear?" "They said you have anger problems from the war, and that the judge would keep me away from you for my own safety. Bill said he was going to be my new daddy and that I needed to get used to it." Jeremy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. They weren't just destroying his marriage. They were actively working to erase him from his daughter's life. "Leah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Daddy is going to fix this situation. While I'm fixing it, you might hear some things about me that aren't true. People might tell you that Daddy is dangerous or that Daddy has done bad things. Do you understand that sometimes people lie to get what they want? Like how Bill lied about me falling down the stairs. Exactly like that. No matter what anyone tells you, remember that Daddy loves you more than anything in the world, and everything Daddy does is to protect you. Can you remember that?" "Yes, Daddy." "Good girl. Now, I need you to be very brave for a few more days. Can you do that for me?" That evening, Jeremy met Blake at a diner outside of town. Blake had been conducting his own surveillance and had troubling news to report. "They're moving fast," Blake said, sliding photographs across the table. "Christina met with her lawyer this morning, and they filed emergency custody papers this afternoon. They're claiming you made threatening statements at the hospital." Jeremy examined the legal documents Blake had somehow acquired. The petition painted him as an unstable veteran who had stormed into the hospital in a threatening manner and intimidated hospital staff and law enforcement. It requested immediate sole custody for Christina and supervised visitation only for Jeremy. "There's more," Blake continued. "I followed Bill to a meeting with Arthur Norris. They're planning something big, some kind of development deal that would make them both rich. But they need clean records to qualify for federal funding." Jeremy looked up from the papers. Meaning Bill can't have a domestic violence conviction on his record when the federal grants are processed. So they're going to make this whole thing disappear by painting you as the threat. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place. Bill hadn't just hurt Leah out of anger. He'd done it because he felt entitled to control Jeremy's family. And now, instead of facing consequences, he was using his connections to turn Jeremy into the villain. "Blake, I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "Tomorrow morning, Christina is going to get a phone call. A very specific phone call that's going to change everything." "What kind of call?" Jeremy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind that reminds her that she married a man who never leaves his battles unfinished." As they left the diner, Jeremy felt the familiar sensation of shifting into operational mode. For 15 years, he'd been a protector, following rules of engagement and working within the system. But the system had failed his daughter, and now Jeremy was going to operate outside its boundaries. Bill Hogan and Christina Gates had declared war on the wrong man. They'd hurt the only person in the world that Jeremy Gates loved more than his own life. Now they were going to learn what happened when you made an enemy of someone who had spent 15 years perfecting the art of destroying enemies. Chapter 5. Gathering the Pack. Jeremy stood in his empty house for the first time since his deployment, seeing it through new eyes. Christina had already begun removing their joint possessions, boxing up anything that connected her to their shared life. Pictures of their wedding were gone, replaced by empty spots on the walls that looked like wounds. But she'd left behind Jeremy's things, his military commendations, his photographs from overseas, Leah's artwork from elementary school. Whether through oversight or spite, she created a shrine to everything she was trying to erase. Blake emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 beers. "She cleaned out the joint account yesterday. Left you with about $300. Smart move, Jeremy said, genuinely impressed by the tactical thinking. Cut off my resources. Make it harder for me to fight the custody battle. Gate, maybe it's time to think about playing this straight. Get a good lawyer. Fight this in court. Blake. Jeremy's voice carried a warning. They broke my daughter's jaw and are now trying to paint me as the threat. The legal system is designed to protect people like Bill, connected, white, successful businessman versus scary veteran with PTSD claims. You know how this ends. Blake knew Jeremy was right. He'd seen too many good soldiers destroyed by family courts that didn't understand military life. So what's the plan? The plan is to remind everyone involved that I have skills they don't teach in law school. Jeremy's phone rang. Sam Garrett's name appeared on the screen. Gate, you need to hear this. I've been monitoring Bill's communications like you asked. He just called someone named Jean Mays, apparently a fixer who handles problems for wealthy clients. They're planning to escalate things. Define escalate. They want to provoke you into doing something violent. Get you arrested, maybe even committed for psychological evaluation. Mays specializes in manufacturing evidence of instability in divorce cases. Jeremy felt a cold smile cross his face. They want to see unstable? Tell me more about this Jean Mays. Former cop, kicked off the force for excessive force complaints. Now, he runs a private security firm that's really just a cover for intimidation and evidence manufacturing. Word is he's got judges and social workers on his payroll. Sam, I need you to come down here. Bring Wendell and Mike if they're available. The whole old squad? Gate, what are you planning? I'm planning to show these people what happens when civilians try to play war games with actual warriors. By evening, Jeremy's house had been transformed into a tactical operations center. Sam Garrett arrived first, followed by Wendell Bates and Mike Eakin, all former members of Jeremy's unit who now worked various private sector jobs. Each man brought skills that would prove invaluable in the coming operation. Gentlemen, Jeremy began, laying out photographs and documents on his dining room table. I'm calling in every favor, every debt, every bond of brotherhood we've built over 15 years of service together. He explained the situation methodically, showing them the medical reports from Leah's injuries, the custody documents, and the intelligence Sam had gathered on Bill and his associates. This isn't about revenge, Jeremy continued. This is about protecting my daughter and ensuring that the people who hurt her face appropriate consequences. Wendell, a former military intelligence officer, studied the documents carefully. Gate, this Jean Mays character is connected. Taking him on means taking on some powerful people. Then we take on powerful people. Mike, their former demolitions expert, was examining building blueprints that Sam had somehow acquired. If we're doing this, we do it right. No half measures. No leaving loose ends. Agreed. Sam, what do we know about Bill's financial situation? He's leveraged to the teeth. The city contracts from Arthur Norris are the only thing keeping him afloat. He's got gambling debts to Hubert Brock's organization, about $200,000. Jeremy nodded. Hubert Brock ran the most efficient criminal organization in the region, known for their business-like approach to debt collection. Wendell, I need you to dig into Arthur Norris. Find out how deep his corruption goes and who else might be involved. Mike, I want you to examine Bill's construction sites. Look for safety violations, environmental issues, anything that could shut him down. What about the immediate threat? Blake asked. They're planning to provoke you into an incident. Then we give them an incident, but not the one they're expecting. Jeremy pulled out his laptop and began typing. I'm going to tell you all something that doesn't leave this room. During my last deployment, I discovered evidence of weapons trafficking by a private contractor named Jeff Blackburn. The evidence was classified, but copies exist in secure locations. The room went quiet. They all understood the implications. Blackburn has been selling American weapons to insurgent groups for 3 years. I've been holding that evidence as insurance, waiting for the right moment to use it. That moment is now. Gate, that's treason-level stuff. You could bring down half the defense establishment. I could, but I'm not interested in bringing down half the defense establishment. I'm interested in bringing down the people who hurt my daughter. Jeremy opened a secure communication channel and began typing a message. Jeff Blackburn has connections to Jean Mays through a private military contractor network. When Blackburn's activities become public, Mays will be implicated as well. The investigation will tie up both of them for years. And Bill is going to discover that his gambling debts have been sold to a very impatient creditor. He's also going to learn that his city contracts are being investigated for bid rigging. And Arthur Norris is going to find out that his tax returns for the past 5 years are being audited by both the IRS and the state. Sam whistled softly. Gate, you're not just destroying them. You're destroying their entire network. That's the point. These people hurt my daughter because they thought they could act without consequences. They're going to learn that every action has consequences, and some consequences last forever. Blake looked troubled. What about Christina? She's still Leah's mother. Jeremy's expression hardened. Christina made her choice when she allowed a violent man around my daughter. She chose him over Leah's safety, and now she's choosing him over Leah's relationship with her father. Those choices have consequences too. You're talking about destroying your daughter's mother. I'm talking about protecting my daughter from people who have already proven they'll hurt her to get what they want. The room fell silent as the magnitude of Jeremy's plan became clear. This wasn't just about revenge or even justice. This was about total warfare against everyone who had participated in the betrayal and assault on his family. Gentlemen, you have 24 hours to decide if you're in or out. If you're out, no hard feelings, but you never heard this conversation. If you're in, we move fast and we move hard, and we don't stop until every threat to my daughter has been eliminated. One by one, each man nodded his agreement. They followed Jeremy through Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. They'd trusted him with their lives in foreign wars against foreign enemies. Now, they were going to trust him in a domestic war against domestic enemies. And Jeremy Gates had never lost a war. Chapter 6. The Trap is Set. The next morning, Jeremy sat in his car outside Leah's school, watching through binoculars as Christina and Bill dropped her off. His daughter moved carefully, her jaw still wired shut, but she managed a small wave when she spotted his vehicle. That simple gesture strengthened his resolve and confirmed that everything he was about to set in motion was necessary. His phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Packages delivered. Blackburn is already panicking. Phase 1 had begun. Jeremy had spent the night crafting a series of anonymous tips to various federal agencies, each containing carefully curated portions of Jeff Blackburn's illegal weapons sales. By dawn, Blackburn's offices were being raided by ATF agents, and the ripple effects were already reaching Jean Mays and his network of corrupt officials. Mike's voice came through Jeremy's earpiece. Spotted 2 vehicles conducting surveillance on your house. Professional setup, multiple occupants. They're planning something. Good. Let them plan. Wendell, what's the status on Arthur Norris? Wendell's voice crackled through the secure channel. IRS audit initiated this morning. State corruption investigators received a comprehensive package about his contract steering. He's about to have a very bad week. Sam, how's our friend Bill handling his financial difficulties? Hubert Brock's people paid him a visit at his construction site about an hour ago. Seems someone informed them that Bill had been bragging about not needing to pay his debts because he was about to come into serious money through marriage. Jeremy smiled coldly. Gambling organizations didn't appreciate being treated as optional expenses. Blake, status on Christina? She's meeting with her lawyer right now. Seems very agitated about something. What Christina didn't know was that her sister, Detective Rosa Wallace, had been suspended pending an internal affairs investigation into her handling of domestic violence cases. Wendell had discovered that Rosa had been systematically downgrading domestic violence charges in exchange for financial considerations from defense attorneys. The carefully constructed network that Christina and Bill had relied upon was collapsing faster than they could adapt. Jeremy's phone rang. The caller ID showed Christina's number. Hello, Christina. Jeremy, what the hell is going on? Her voice was high with panic. Rosa got suspended this morning. Bill's being harassed by some criminals, and my lawyer says there are irregularities with our custody filing. I wouldn't know anything about that. I've been focused on our daughter's recovery. Don't play dumb with me. I know you're behind this somehow. Christina, I'm a simple soldier who's been deployed for the past 8 months. I don't have the connections or resources to orchestrate whatever problems you're experiencing. Bill says you have connections. Military people who do dirty work. Jeremy let the silence stretch before responding. Bill seems to know a lot about my capabilities for someone who's never served his country. Maybe you should spend less time talking about my connections and more time worrying about his own problems. Jeremy, please. We can work this out. We can share custody, work together for Leah's sake. Christina, 3 days ago you filed papers claiming I was a dangerous, unstable veteran who shouldn't be allowed near our daughter. Today you want to work together. What changed? Bill convinced me to file those papers. I was scared and confused. Scared of what, Christina? Of me, or of the consequences of your choices? Jeremy could hear her crying on the other end of the line. A part of him, a rapidly diminishing part, felt something like sympathy. But then he remembered Leah's broken jaw and the absolute terror in her eyes when she'd asked if he was going to leave again. Christina, let me explain something to you. For 15 years, I've killed people who threatened American families. I've eliminated threats to innocent children in countries you can't pronounce. I've hunted down and destroyed people who hurt the defenseless. Jeremy, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because you allowed a violent man to hurt my daughter, and then you tried to use the legal system to prevent me from protecting her. You declared war on the one person in this world who would die before letting anyone hurt Leah. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Multiple choices. And now you're experiencing the consequences of those choices. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that this ends one of two ways. Either you voluntarily surrender full custody of Leah to me and disappear from our lives, or I destroy every person who has enabled this situation and ensure that you spend the rest of your life regretting the day you decided to betray your family. I can't just give up my daughter. Your daughter is in the hospital with a broken jaw because of the man you chose over her safety. You've already given her up, Christina. I'm just making it official. Jeremy hung up the phone and immediately called Wendell. Wendell, accelerate the timeline on Arthur Norris. I want him arrested today. Already in motion. Turns out he's been skimming from federal infrastructure grants. FBI is very interested in having a conversation with him. Sam, what's Jean May's status? Blackburn is apparently singing like a canary to save his own skin. May's operation is about to be exposed in federal court. He won't be manufacturing evidence for anyone for a very long time. Jeremy felt the familiar satisfaction of a well-executed operation. Every piece was falling into place exactly as planned. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. BH. Jeremy stared at the message for a moment, then forwarded it to his entire team with a single-word response. Finally, Bill Hogan had just made the critical error that Jeremy had been waiting for, a direct threat that could be documented and used against him. Mike, I need you to pay a visit to our friend Bill. Nothing violent, just a conversation between two men about appropriate boundaries. What kind of conversation? The kind where you explain to him that threatening the father of a child he assaulted is not a wise course of action. Copy that. Should I mention your military background? No need. I have a feeling he's about to learn about it firsthand. Because while Jeremy had been systematically dismantling the support network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah, he had also been preparing for the possibility that Bill might escalate to direct confrontation. And Jeremy Gates had been hoping he would. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Bill Hogan was not a smart man, but he was a proud one, and pride made him dangerous in the way that cornered animals become dangerous. As his world collapsed around him, gambling debts being called in, city contracts under federal investigation, his political connections distancing themselves from him, he made the mistake that Jeremy had been anticipating. He decided to take direct action against Jeremy. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening as Jeremy was leaving the hospital after visiting Leah. The doctors had said she could go home the next day, but only to a safe environment. Christina had already lost her bid for emergency custody when Detective Rosa Wallace's suspension became public knowledge, calling into question all of her previous case decisions. Jeremy was walking to his car when he noticed them, 3 men positioned strategically in the parking lot. Professional setup, multiple escape routes designed to box him in. He recognized the tactics immediately. Paramilitary contractors, probably Gene May's people, though Mays himself was currently in federal custody. Bill Hogan stepped out from behind a van, flanked by 2 large men Jeremy didn't recognize. Time for a conversation, soldier boy. Jeremy stopped walking and calmly assessed the situation. 3 opponents, all armed based on their clothing profiles, confined space with limited visibility. Classic ambush scenario. Bill, I was wondering when you'd work up the courage for a face-to-face meeting. You've been busy, haven't you? Destroying everything I've built, turning my business partners against me. I've been a concerned father dealing with a man who assaulted my daughter. Everything else is just coincidence. Bill laughed, but there was no humor in it. Coincidence? Arthur Norris gets arrested the same day my gambling debts get called in. Gene Mays gets raided the same day your wife's sister gets suspended. You think I'm stupid? I think you're a lot of things, Bill. Stupid is just one of them. Jeremy noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Blake and Sam were positioning themselves behind the hospital's emergency vehicles, having followed Jeremy as planned. Mike and Wendell were approaching from the opposite direction. Here's what's going to happen, Bill continued, his voice gaining confidence from his apparent numerical advantage. You're going to back off. Drop whatever charges you think you can file. Stop interfering with my business, and accept that Christina and Leah are part of my family now. And if I don't, then you're going to have an accident. A tragic accident involving a mentally unstable veteran who couldn't handle the stress of civilian life. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. So you're threatening to kill me? I'm explaining your options. I appreciate the clarity. It makes what happens next much easier to justify. Jeremy's phone was in his hand, recording everything. But more importantly, Blake was recording from multiple angles, and Sam was broadcasting the conversation to his contacts in federal law enforcement. You see, Bill, you just made a critical tactical error. You brought this confrontation to a location with multiple witnesses, security cameras, and federal agents who are very interested in your activities. Bill's confidence wavered slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Jeff Blackburn finished his cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors this morning. He provided them with detailed information about Gene May's operation, including the names of everyone who's used May's services to manufacture evidence or intimidate witnesses. The color drained from Bill's face. Oh, and Arthur Norris? He's also been very cooperative with investigators. Seems he kept detailed records of all his corrupt dealings, including payments made on your behalf to various city officials. Jeremy took a step forward, and Bill's companions instinctively reached for their weapons. I wouldn't, Jeremy said calmly. The parking lot is currently surrounded by federal agents who are very excited about the possibility of adding weapons charges to your growing list of federal felonies. As if summoned by his words, men in FBI windbreakers began emerging from vehicles throughout the parking lot. What Bill had thought was an isolated confrontation had actually been a carefully orchestrated trap. You see, Bill, while you were planning this little meeting, I was working with federal prosecutors to ensure that your threats against me were properly documented. Threatening a witness in a federal investigation is a serious crime. Agent Spencer Cooper, Jeremy's former commanding officer, now working as a federal liaison, approached the group with a team of armed agents. William Hogan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit witness intimidation, assault on a minor, and about 15 other federal charges that we'll discuss downtown. As Bill was handcuffed, Jeremy leaned in close enough to whisper in his ear. Remember what I told you about consequences, Bill? Every action has consequences. You hurt my daughter, and now you get to spend the next 20 years learning about accountability. Bill's companions were also arrested, though they would likely cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. The criminal network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah was being systematically dismantled by federal law enforcement. Jeremy, Agent Cooper said after the arrests were complete, we're going to need your formal statement about the threats made tonight. Of course, should I mention that Mr. Hogan also confessed to assaulting my daughter during his threatening rant? That would be helpful for the prosecutors, yes. As Jeremy watched Bill being loaded into a federal transport vehicle, he felt a deep satisfaction. This wasn't just justice. This was military precision justice, executed with the same thoroughness he'd once applied to eliminating enemy targets. His phone rang. Christina's number. Jeremy, I just saw the news. Bill's been arrested. Federal charges, Christina. Multiple felonies. He's not getting out on bail. I didn't know about any of it. I thought he was just a successful businessman. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Because Bill was just the beginning. Everyone who enabled this situation, everyone who helped create the circumstances that led to Leah being hurt, is going to face consequences. Including me? Jeremy looked up at the hospital window where his daughter was sleeping, her jaw still wired shut from injuries inflicted by the man Christina had brought into their lives. That depends entirely on your choices from this point forward, Christina. Choose wisely. Chapter 8. Total War. Christina Gates sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of belongings she'd removed from the family home, watching news reports about Bill Hogan's arrest. The federal charges were extensive: witness intimidation, conspiracy, fraud, and, most damaging, a new charge of aggravated assault on a minor based on Leah's injuries. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters, lawyers, social services, and creditors were all trying to reach her. The carefully constructed new life she'd built with Bill was collapsing faster than she could process. But the call that terrified her most was the one from Therese Jacobs, her divorce attorney. Christina, we have a problem. A big problem. Bigger than my fiancé being arrested on federal charges? Much bigger. The custody case has been transferred to federal court because of the witness intimidation charges. Your husband's legal team has filed motions alleging that you were complicit in the conspiracy to deprive him of his parental rights. Christina felt her blood turn to ice. What does that mean? It means they're not just fighting for custody of Leah. They're building a case for criminal charges against you. Conspiracy to commit parental kidnapping, filing false police reports, perjury in federal court. That's impossible. I never. Christina, they have documentation. Emails between you and Bill discussing how to handle Jeremy. Text messages about getting restraining orders based on fabricated threats. Phone records showing coordination with your sister to downgrade the domestic violence charges. The room seemed to spin around Christina. Everything she'd done to protect her new relationship was being used as evidence of a criminal conspiracy. There's more, Therese continued. Jeremy's legal team has filed for emergency custody based on what they're calling an imminent threat to the child's safety. They're arguing that you knowingly placed Leah in danger by maintaining a relationship with a violent felon. He wasn't a felon when Christina, they have financial records showing that Bill has been under federal investigation for over a year. They're claiming you should have known about his criminal activities and chose to ignore them to protect your relationship. Christina disconnected the call and immediately dialed Jeremy's number. Hello, Christina. Jeremy, please. We need to talk. I'm listening. The lawyers are saying you're trying to have me arrested. That can't be true. I'm Leah's mother. Christina, you were Leah's mother when you allowed a violent criminal to live in her house. You were her mother when you helped him plan to frame me as an unstable threat. You were her mother when you chose to protect him instead of her after he broke her jaw. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now you're experiencing the consequences of those choices. Christina began crying. What do you want from me? I'll do anything. I want you to understand something very clearly. This isn't about punishment or revenge. This is about ensuring that my daughter is never again placed in danger by someone who claims to love her. I do love her. She's my daughter too. Then prove it. Sign the custody transfer papers. Admit in court that you made errors in judgment that endangered Leah's safety. Cooperate fully with federal investigators. And if I do that, the criminal charges will be dropped. Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. Christina, I can't make that promise. The federal prosecutors make their own decisions based on the evidence. But I can tell you that your cooperation would be viewed favorably. Jeremy, I'm scared. You should be scared. You should have been scared when you allowed a violent man around our daughter. Fear might have prevented this entire situation. What about us? What about our marriage? Jeremy's laugh was cold and bitter. Our marriage ended the moment you chose another man over your family. The paperwork is just a formality. I never meant for any of this to happen. Intent is irrelevant. Results are what matter. And the result is that my daughter was assaulted by a man you brought into her life. Christina could hear the finality in his voice. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender demand. If I sign the papers, if I cooperate, will I be able to see Leah? That will depend on several factors. Your level of cooperation with federal investigators, your willingness to undergo psychological evaluation and parenting classes, your ability to demonstrate that you can prioritize Leah's safety over your own desires. Supervised visitation? Maybe. Eventually. If you earn it. Christina felt her world shrinking to a single choice. Fight Jeremy in federal court and risk prison, or surrender completely and hope for eventual mercy. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. After that, my offer expires and you deal with the federal prosecutors on your own. Jeremy disconnected the call and immediately contacted Agent Cooper. Cooper, what's the status on the broader investigation? Arthur Norris rolled on everyone. We've got indictments coming down on 12 city officials, 8 contractors, and 3 judges. Your friend Bill was just the tip of the iceberg. And G. Mays, singing like a canary. His operation was bigger than we thought. He's been manufacturing evidence and intimidating witnesses in family court cases across 3 states. We're looking at potentially hundreds of convictions that need to be reviewed. Jeremy felt a deep satisfaction. The corruption that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah was being completely eradicated. Cooper, I need one more favor. Name it. I want Christina offered a cooperation agreement. Full immunity in exchange for complete cooperation and voluntary surrender of custody. Jeremy, after what she put you and Leah through, this isn't about revenge. It's about protecting my daughter. If Christina cooperates, she admits her mistakes publicly, which protects Leah from future manipulation. If she fights, the court battle could drag on for years. And you want this over quickly. I want this over permanently. The next morning, Jeremy sat in his lawyer's office reviewing the final custody transfer documents. Beside him, Leah played quietly with her tablet, her jaw finally freed from the wires but still tender. Daddy, will I still be able to see Mommy sometimes? Jeremy looked at his daughter, his brave, intelligent daughter who had endured so much because of adult failures, and felt his resolve strengthen. Maybe Princess. That will depend on whether Mommy can learn to make better choices. I hope she can. I still love her, even though she made bad decisions. Jeremy hugged his daughter close, marveling at her capacity for forgiveness. It was a capacity he'd lost somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, and he had no desire to recover it. Some betrayals were unforgivable. Some mistakes had permanent consequences. And Jeremy Gates never forgot and never forgave. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. 6 months later, Jeremy stood in the kitchen of his new house, a secure, private property 30 miles outside Charlotte, watching Leah help Blake prepare Sunday dinner. His daughter's jaw had healed completely, though she still unconsciously touched it when she was nervous. The physical scars were gone, but Jeremy knew the emotional ones would take longer to fade. Christina had signed the custody transfer papers, cooperated with federal investigators, and received a suspended sentence in exchange for her testimony against the broader corruption network. She was currently living in a supervised halfway house, attending court-ordered therapy sessions, and working in a non-profit organization as part of her community service. She wrote letters to Leah every week. Jeremy read each one carefully before deciding whether to pass them along. Most were appropriate expressions of love and regret. Some were manipulative attempts to shift blame or generate sympathy. Those letters went directly into the shredder. Bill Hogan had received 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. His construction company had been dissolved, its assets seized to pay restitution to the victims of his various crimes. The gambling debts had been satisfied through bankruptcy proceedings, though Hubert Brock's organization had made it clear that Bill's physical safety in prison was not guaranteed. Arthur Norris was serving 12 years, and had been ordered to pay back $17 million in stolen federal funds. Gene Mays received 30 years for his witness intimidation operation, and Jeff Blackburn was cooperating with ongoing investigations into defense contractor corruption in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detective Rosa Wallace had been fired from the police department and was facing her own criminal charges for evidence tampering and accepting bribes. The entire corrupt network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah had been systematically destroyed. Jeremy's phone buzzed with a text message from Christina. "Please, just one supervised visit. I haven't seen her in 6 months. I've completed all my court requirements." He showed the message to Leah, who was now 13 and mature beyond her years. "What do you think, princess?" Leah considered carefully before responding. "I miss her, Daddy, but I'm also scared. What if she tries to take me away again?" "She can't take you away. Ever. The custody transfer is permanent, and she has no legal rights to challenge it. Then, maybe we could see her for a little while. Somewhere safe." Jeremy nodded. Despite everything Christina had done, she was still Leah's mother, and Leah deserved the opportunity to maintain some relationship with her if she chose to. "I'll arrange something supervised and public. But Leah, I need you to understand that this doesn't mean Mommy is coming back into our lives in any significant way. I understand, Daddy. You're my family now. You and Uncle Blake and Uncle Sam and everyone who protects us." Jeremy felt a surge of pride. His daughter had learned to distinguish between people who truly cared about her welfare and those who claimed to care while acting in their own interests. That afternoon, Jeremy received an unexpected visitor. Sam arrived with a woman Jeremy didn't recognize, attractive, professional, probably in her late 30s. "Gate, I'd like you to meet Dr. Allison Klein. She's a trauma counselor who works with military families." Jeremy shook Allison's hand, immediately noting the confident grip and direct eye contact. "Dr. Klein, Mr. Gates, I've heard a lot about you from Sam and Blake. I wanted to talk with you about Leah's long-term emotional recovery." They sat on Jeremy's back deck while Leah played with Blake's dog in the yard. Allison observed Leah carefully before speaking. "She's remarkably resilient, but she's also learned to be hyper-vigilant about adult emotions and motivations. That's a survival mechanism, but it can be exhausting for a child. What are you recommending?" "Continued stability, consistent boundaries, and help processing the betrayal by trusted adults. Children who experience what Leah experienced often struggle with trust issues and emotional regulation." Jeremy watched his daughter playing, noting the way she periodically glanced back to ensure he was still there. "She's already in therapy with a specialist who understands trauma in military families." "Good. But I'm also concerned about you, Mr. Gates. You've been through your own trauma, the betrayal by your wife, the assault on your daughter, the necessity of taking extreme measures to protect your family." "I'm fine." Allison smiled slightly. "With respect, sir, no one is fine after what you've been through. Your response was necessary and effective, but it came at a psychological cost." Jeremy considered her words. Since Christina's betrayal, he'd felt something cold and permanent settle into his chest. He found it difficult to trust anyone outside his military family. He analyzed every interaction for potential threats or deceptions. He'd become hyper-vigilant in the same way he'd accused Leah of being. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you've spent so much energy protecting Leah that you haven't processed your own trauma. And eventually, that unprocessed trauma will affect your ability to parent effectively." That evening, after Allison left and Leah was asleep, Jeremy sat on his deck with Blake, sharing a beer and watching the stars. "She's right, Blake said, "about the therapy thing. I don't need therapy. I need my daughter to be safe and happy." "Gate, when's the last time you thought about dating? About building a relationship with someone?" Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. "I can't trust anyone with that kind of access to Leah. Anyone I let into our lives becomes a potential threat to her safety. That's not healthy, brother. For you or for her. It's realistic. Christina convinced me she loved our family, and then she brought a violent criminal into our home. I trusted her completely, and she used that trust to endanger the most important thing in my life. So, you're never going to trust anyone again?" I'm never going to give anyone the opportunity to hurt Leah again. Blake nodded, understanding the logic, even if he disagreed with the conclusion. What about forgiveness, Gate? Christina made terrible choices, but she's trying to make amends. Don't you think there's value in modeling forgiveness for Leah? Jeremy turned to look at his friend, his expression harder than stone. Blake, Christina allowed a violent man to assault my daughter and then tried to use the legal system to prevent me from protecting her. Those actions had consequences that can't be undone. Leah will always carry the memory of that assault. She'll always wonder if the people who claim to love her might betray her. But, no buts. Some actions are unforgivable. Some betrayals are permanent. I will ensure that Leah has the opportunity to maintain a relationship with her mother if she chooses, but I will never forgive Christina, and I will never trust her. And Bill, Jeremy's smile was arctic. Bill will serve every day of his sentence, assuming he survives it. And if he ever gets out, he'll discover that I have a very long memory and unlimited patience. Blake understood that the conversation was over. Jeremy Gates had made his decisions about forgiveness and trust, and those decisions were as permanent as carved stone. As the months turned to years, Jeremy built a new life with Leah at its center. They traveled together, trained together, learned together. She grew into a confident, intelligent young woman who understood the difference between genuine protection and controlling behavior. Christina was eventually allowed supervised visits, which she treasured and never took for granted. She never asked for more than Jeremy was willing to give, understanding that her relationship with her daughter existed entirely at his discretion. Bill Hogan died in federal prison during his 4th year of incarceration. The official cause was listed as complications from injuries sustained during a fight with other inmates. Jeremy felt no satisfaction at the news, only a sense of complete closure. On Leah's 18th birthday, she asked Jeremy about his philosophy on forgiveness. Daddy, don't you think holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts the people who wronged you? Jeremy considered the question carefully before responding. Princess, anger isn't what I carry. What I carry is clarity. I understand that some people will hurt others for their own benefit, and I refuse to pretend otherwise. That clarity has kept you safe for the past 6 years. But what about mercy? What about second chances? You give second chances to people who make mistakes in judgment while trying to do the right thing. You don't give second chances to people who deliberately choose to harm innocent children. Leah nodded, understanding the distinction. I love you, Daddy. Thank you for protecting me. I love you too, Princess. And I always will. As Jeremy watched his daughter prepare for college, he felt a deep satisfaction. He had kept his promise to protect her, and she had grown into a strong, capable woman who could protect herself. Some men might have chosen forgiveness, might have taken the higher road, might have turned the other cheek. Jeremy Gates was not one of those men. He was a man who understood that evil existed in the world, that some people would always choose cruelty over kindness, and that the only way to protect the innocent was to ensure that evil people faced absolute consequences for their evil actions. He had never forgiven. He had never forgotten. And his daughter was alive, safe, and happy because of those choices. In Jeremy's world, that was the only victory that mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Victor Vic Castellano had built his life on precision. 20 years in the Marines, 15 of those in force reconnaissance, had taught him that preparation was everything. Every mission required intelligence, planning, and flawless execution. Now, at 42, he applied those same principles to his civilian life as a private security consultant for high-net-worth clients. His reputation was spotless, methodical, reliable, and utterly ruthless when necessary. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd failed to apply that same scrutiny to his marriage. 5 years ago, he discovered his wife of 12 years, Tessa Malone, had been sleeping with her yoga instructor, Blake Thornfield. Not just sleeping, she'd been planning to leave him, take their daughter Emma, and start fresh with her 28-year-old boy toy. Vic had confronted them both with military precision, presenting evidence, demanding answers. Tessa had the audacity to blame him for being emotionally unavailable and too controlling. Blake had actually tried to fight him, a mistake that left the younger man with a broken nose and a clear understanding that he should stay away from other men's families. The divorce had been brutal but swift. Vic's lawyer, Harold Brennan, was a pit bull who'd seen plenty of military divorces. Despite Tessa's attempts to paint Vic as unstable, his spotless service record and character witnesses had prevailed. Joint custody was awarded, but Vic had insisted on specific conditions. Any man Tessa dated seriously had to pass a background check. Emma couldn't be left alone with strangers, and all overnight arrangements required his approval. Tessa had violated those terms within 6 months by moving in with Blake. Vic's subsequent legal action had resulted in modified custody. Emma spent most of her time with him now, visiting her mother on scheduled weekends. It was an arrangement that worked, or so he'd thought. Last month, his mother, Elena Castellano, had suffered a massive stroke. At 78, she was the only family Vic had left, and he dropped everything to be by her side in Phoenix. Emma had been scheduled for her weekend with Tessa anyway, so extending it by a few days seemed reasonable. Tessa had agreed without argument. Unusual for her, but Vic had been too focused on his mother's condition to analyze it. Elena was stable now, showing signs of recovery that had her doctors cautiously optimistic. Vic had been planning to fly back to Seattle the next morning when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Seattle Metro Police. "Mr. Castellano? This is Detective Amy Rodriguez with Seattle PD. I need to inform you that your daughter, Emma Castellano, was found unconscious behind a commercial dumpster on Pine Street approximately 2 hours ago." The world tilted. Vic's training kicked in, gather information, assess the situation, act. "What's her condition?" "She's conscious now at Seattle Children's Hospital. Appears to be dehydration and exposure." "Sir, where is Emma supposed to be right now?" "With her mother, Tessa Malone, and her husband, Blake Thornfield. They live on Queen and Hill." Vic was already moving, grabbing his jacket, heading for the door. "We'll need to speak with them. Are you able to come to the hospital?" "I'm in Phoenix. I'll be on the next flight." The call to Tessa came 20 minutes later, after Vic had booked a red-eye and was driving to Sky Harbor Airport. She answered on the 4th ring, and he could hear music and laughter in the background. "Vic? God, it's like midnight there or what? Where's Emma?" "What do you mean?" "She's sleeping." "What?" "No, she's not. She was found unconscious behind a dumpster 2 hours ago. She's in the hospital." The line went silent for a moment. Then Tessa laughed, actually laughed. "Oh my God, really? She probably just wandered off. You know how she is, always exploring." Vic's hand tightened on the phone. "She's 8 years old, Tessa." "8? And you're laughing?" Blake's voice came through in the background, slurred with alcohol. "I just told her to go outside and play. Kids need fresh air." Vic hung up. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with rage so pure it felt like molten steel in his veins. He called Harold Brennan from the airport. "Harold, it's Vic. I need you to meet me at Seattle Children's Hospital tomorrow morning at 7. And I need you to call in every favor you have with Family Court. We're going to destroy them." Chapter 2. The Architect of Pain. The flight to Seattle was the longest 5 hours of Vic's life. He'd called the hospital 3 times, spoken with doctors, confirmed Emma was stable, but being held for observation. Dehydration, mild hypothermia, some scratches and bruises. She'd told the nurses she'd been playing outside when she got lost, but something in her voice over the phone when he'd finally been allowed to speak with her suggested there was more to the story. Harold met him at the hospital as promised, bringing coffee and a grim expression. At 65, Harold had the weathered face of a man who'd spent 3 decades fighting ugly battles in family court. He'd handled Vic's original divorce and had warned him then that Tessa was trouble. "Talk to me," Harold said as they walked through the hospital corridors. "Emma was found behind a dumpster at 2 a.m. unconscious from exposure. Why called Tessa? She laughed. Blake admitted he told an 8-year-old to go outside and play at what had to be close to midnight. Jesus Christ. Harold's face darkened. CPS. Already involved. Detective Rodriguez said they're opening an investigation. Emma was awake when they reached her room, small and fragile-looking in hospital bed. But her eyes, her father's eyes, were alert and watching. She launched herself into Vic's arms when he entered, and he held her close, breathing in the scent of hospital soap and something else, fear. Daddy, I was so scared. I couldn't find the house, and it got dark and cold. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened? The story came out in pieces. Blake had been drinking heavily, while Tessa was at what she called a girls' night. Around 11 p.m., Emma had asked for water. Blake had snapped at her, told her she was annoying, and ordered her to go outside and leave him alone. When she protested that it was dark, he'd physically pushed her out the back door and locked it. Emma had tried knocking, tried calling for Blake, but he'd passed out on the couch with music blasting. She'd attempted to walk to a neighbor's house, but gotten turned around in the unfamiliar neighborhood. She'd eventually collapsed behind the dumpster where a late-night delivery driver had found her. Harold took notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. We'll need official statements from the doctors, the police report, everything. This isn't neglect. This is endangerment. Possibly abuse. After Emma fell asleep, Vic and Harold moved to the hallway. I want them destroyed, Harold. Not just custody. I want their lives turned inside out. Slow down, Vic. I know you're angry. Angry? Vic's voice was quiet, controlled. I'm not angry. I'm calculating. You remember what I did for a living, Harold? I solve problems permanently. This is a problem. Harold studied his client's face. He'd seen that expression once before, during the original divorce proceedings when Tessa had tried to claim Vic was mentally unstable due to his military service. It was the face of a man who'd made a decision. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Blake Thornfield and my ex-wife just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They hurt my daughter, my only child, and then laughed about it. That requires a response. A legal response, Vic. Of course. Vic's smile was cold. But legal doesn't mean limited. I want you to start with the custody case. Emergency hearing, full custody, the works. I want their parental rights questioned. I want CPS crawling up their asses with a microscope. That's doable. What else? I want to know everything about Blake Thornfield. Everything. Background, finances, family, debts, secrets, all of it. And I want a same deep dive on Tessa. There are things we missed the first time around. Harold nodded slowly. I can arrange for a private investigator. No need. I still have contacts from my consulting work. People who specialize in comprehensive background research. Vic, whatever you're planning. I'm planning to be a good father who protects his daughter from people who would harm her. Nothing more, nothing less. But Harold caught the underlying steel in Vic's voice, and he knew that Blake and Tessa had no idea what was coming for them. Chapter 3. The First Move. 3 days later, Vic sat in his home office, surrounded by documents and photographs. Emma was at school, her first day back, though he'd arranged for a counselor to be available. She was resilient, like her father, but the incident had shaken her more than she was letting on. His contact, Maria Santos, had delivered results faster than expected. Maria was a former CIA analyst who now ran a boutique investigation firm that catered to clients who needed information quickly and quietly. Vic had used her services before for client security assessments, and she owed him a favor from a situation in Miami 2 years ago. Blake Thornfield's file made for interesting reading. 29 years old, originally from Portland. He'd moved to Seattle 18 months ago, around the time he'd started sleeping with Tessa. His yoga instructor certification was legitimate, but barely. He'd gotten it through a weekend course, not the extensive training he claimed. More interesting was his employment history. 5 jobs in 3 years, all ending with him being fired or quitting under suspicious circumstances. The most damning information was financial. Blake was drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, student loans in default, and 3 months behind on his car payments. He'd been evicted from his last apartment, which explained why he'd moved in with Tessa so quickly. The man was essentially a parasite, latching onto women for financial support. But it was the personal information that truly interested Vic. Blake had a pattern. Target older women with money and children, play the sensitive younger man role, then gradually isolate them from friends and family while draining their resources. Tessa was his third such relationship in 5 years. Tessa's file revealed different problems. Since the divorce, she'd been spending far beyond her means. Expensive cars, designer clothes, frequent trips. Her marketing job at a mid-level firm barely covered her mortgage, let alone her lifestyle. She'd been supplementing her income through credit cards and had recently taken out a substantial personal loan. More troubling was the pattern of behavior Maria had uncovered. 3 different neighbors had reported seeing Emma left alone at the house for hours at a time. Tessa had been spotted at bars and clubs regularly, often with Blake, apparently unconcerned about her daughter's whereabouts. Vic's phone buzzed. Harold with an update. Emergency custody hearing is set for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Judge Morrison is presiding. Good news for us. She's tough on child endangerment. CPS filed their preliminary report this morning. It's not pretty for Tessa and Blake. What's the CPS recommendation? Immediate supervised visitation only, pending full investigation. They're particularly concerned about Blake's unsupervised access to Emma. And the criminal investigation? Detective Rodriguez says they're looking at charges of child endangerment and possibly reckless endangerment. Blake's blood alcohol level from the hospital was 0.18. He was blackout drunk when he threw an 8-year-old out of the house. Vic felt satisfaction flow through him like warm honey. The legal system was working exactly as it should. But it wasn't enough, not nearly enough. That evening, he made a series of phone calls. The first was to Tommy Ricci, a former Marine buddy who now worked in reputation management for high-profile clients. Tommy specialized in making problems disappear or making them very visible when that served his clients better. Vic, how's civilian life treating you? It's complicated, Tommy. I need a favor. Big one. Name it. Vic explained the situation, focusing on the facts. Blake's pattern of targeting women, his financial parasitism, his endangerment of Emma. Tommy listened without interruption. So you want this guy's life turned inside out? I want him exposed for what he is. Publicly. Thoroughly. I want every woman in Seattle to know that Blake Thornfield is a predator who targets single mothers and endangers children. I can work with that. Social media campaign, local news connections, maybe some strategic leaks to mom blogger networks. What's your timeline? Start tomorrow, after the custody hearing. I want maximum impact. The second call was to Marcus Webb, who ran a private security firm that Vic had worked with on client assessments. Marcus specialized in the kind of surveillance and intelligence gathering that existed in legal gray areas. Marcus, I need eyes on 2 people. Full surveillance package, financial, personal, professional. I want to know where they go, who they talk to, what they buy, everything. Duration, until I say stop. This is personal, isn't it? Someone hurt my daughter. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He had kids of his own. Consider done. No charge. The third call was the most important. Rachel Kim was an investigative journalist with the Seattle Herald who specialized in exposing predators and scammers. Vic had helped her with a story about financial fraud targeting veterans 2 years ago, providing background on military financial scams. Rachel, it's Vic Castellano. I have a story for you. A guy named Blake Thornfield who preys on single mothers, has a pattern of endangering children, and just put my 8-year-old daughter in the hospital. I'm listening. I'm sending you a file. Everything's documented, verified, legally obtained. This guy is a serial predator, and he's going to do this again unless someone stops him. What's your angle here, Vic? This is clearly personal. My angle is that predators shouldn't be allowed to hunt freely. You helped expose that veteran fraud ring because it was the right thing to do. This is the same principle. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Send me the file. If it checks out, I'll run with it. By midnight, Vic had set 12 different operations in motion. Legal, financial, social, and professional pressure that would systematically dismantle Blake Thornfield's life and ability to harm anyone else's family. It was just the beginning. Tessa thought she'd gotten away with endangering his daughter. Blake thought his actions had no consequences. They were both wrong. Chapter 4. The gathering storm. The custody hearing went exactly as Vic had hoped. Judge Morrison took one look at the police report, the hospital records, and the CPS investigation and awarded him immediate full custody. Tessa was granted supervised visitation only 2 hours every other weekend, with a court-appointed supervisor present. Blake wasn't allowed any contact with Emma whatsoever. Tessa had shown up to court with a public defender, clearly unprepared for the onslaught of evidence Harold presented. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that Blake had been overwhelmed and made a mistake. Judge Morrison's response had been swift and brutal. Ms. Malone, your husband threw an 8-year-old child out of the house at midnight while intoxicated. This court considers that conduct inexcusable and indicative of unfitness for unsupervised parental responsibility. Blake hadn't even attended the hearing. That afternoon, while Emma was at school and safely unaware of the legal proceedings, Vic met with Marcus Webb at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. Marcus slid a tablet across the table containing the first day's surveillance results. Your ex-wife and her husband are having a very bad week, Marcus said with satisfaction. The photos told a clear story. Blake had spent the morning at 3 different payday loan shops, apparently trying to raise cash. All had turned him down. Tessa had been at her lawyer's office for 2 hours, then at her bank for another hour. The bank meeting hadn't gone well, judging by her body language as she left. Financial pressure? Vic asked, building rapidly. Here's the interesting part. Blake's been making calls to his ex-girlfriends, the ones from his previous relationships. He's trying to reconnect, probably looking for another landing pad. And 2 of them hung up on him. The third, a woman named Jennifer Price in Portland, talked to him for 30 minutes. We intercepted enough to know he was asking if he could visit for a few days. Vic studied the surveillance photos. Blake looked desperate, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from the day before. He's running. Gets better. Tommy's social media campaign launched this morning. Hashtag Blake Thornfield Exposed is trending locally. Rachel Kim's story goes live tomorrow in the Herald. And there's something else. Marcus pulled up another file on the tablet. Blake's got a warrant out for his arrest. What? Unpaid child support. Turns out he has a 6-year-old son in Portland from a previous relationship. He's been dodging payments for 2 years. The mother finally got fed up and pressed charges. Seattle PD got the warrant this morning. Vic felt pieces clicking into place. So he's not just a predator. He's a deadbeat dad who abandons his own children. Serial pattern. Kid in Portland, another one in Sacramento, he's never even met. This guy doesn't just target single mothers, he creates them. The information was perfect ammunition for what Vic had planned next. He made a mental note to have Rachel Kim include the deadbeat dad angle in her story. Public opinion was harsh on men who abandoned their children, especially when they were also endangering other people's kids. What about Tessa? Desperate. She tried to get a loan extension at the bank, was turned down. Made 3 calls to her parents in California. They hung up on her the first 2 times, took the 3rd call, but we couldn't intercept the content. Based on her reaction afterward, they said no to whatever she was asking for. Marcus closed the tablet. Vic, what exactly are you building toward here? Because this level of pressure is going to force them into doing something stupid. That's the idea. I need to know if you're planning anything that could blow back on you legally. I got a family to think about. Vic met his friend's eyes. Everything I'm doing is completely legal. I'm exposing a predator and protecting my daughter. If Blake and Tessa make bad decisions as a result of their own criminal behavior coming to light, that's not my fault. Marcus nodded slowly. Just remember, sometimes cornered animals bite. That evening, Vic picked Emma up from school and took her for ice cream. She was quieter than usual, clearly still processing the trauma of a few days ago. As they sat in the shop, she finally spoke. Daddy, am I going to have to see Blake again? No, sweetheart. The judge said you don't have to see Blake anymore. What about Mommy? This was the harder question. You'll still see Mommy sometimes, but only when there's another adult there to make sure you're safe. Emma nodded solemnly. Good. Blake scared me. And Mommy, she trailed off. What about Mommy? She used to be different. Before Blake. She was nicer to me. Out of the mouths of babes. Vic realized that Emma had recognized what he'd only recently understood. Blake had been systematically isolating Tessa from her daughter, poisoning their relationship. It was classic predator behavior, designed to make the mother more dependent on the abuser. Emma, I want you to know that none of what happened was your fault. Adults are supposed to take care of children, not the other way around. I know, Daddy. That's why I like living with you better. You never tell me to go outside in the dark. That night, after Emma was asleep, Vic sat in his office reviewing the dossiers Maria had compiled on Blake's previous victims. 3 women, all single mothers, all left financially and emotionally devastated after Blake moved on. One had lost her house. Another had filed bankruptcy. The third had suffered a nervous breakdown and temporarily lost custody of her own children. The pattern was clear, methodical, and utterly without conscience. Blake Thornfield was a parasite who fed on vulnerable women and left destroyed families in his wake. The fact that he'd endangered Emma was just his latest escalation in a career of predatory behavior. Vic's phone rang. Rachel Kim. Vic, I've been digging into this Blake Thornfield story. It's worse than what you sent me. How much worse? I found 2 more women he victimized. One in Phoenix, one in Denver. Same pattern. Single mother, financial dependency, gradual isolation. The Denver woman's 8-year-old son ended up in foster care for 3 months because Blake convinced her the kid was holding her back from happiness. Vic's blood went cold. He talked a mother into abandoning her child, temporarily. She got him back after Blake moved on, but the damage was done. CPS records show the kid still has trust issues. Are these women willing to go on record? 2 of them are. They want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. My editors approved a full investigative series, 3 parts, starting tomorrow. Front page, above the fold. Good. The more people who know what he is, the better. Vic, there's something else. Something I haven't been able to verify yet, but if it's true, it changes everything. What is it? I think Blake Thornfield isn't his real name. Chapter 5. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Rachel Kim's story hit Seattle like a thunderbolt. The Predator Next Door. How Blake Thornfield targets Seattle's single mothers, ran with photos, documented evidence, and interviews with 3 of his victims. By noon, it was the most shared story in the Herald's online history. The public reaction was swift and merciless. Blake's yoga studio fired him within hours of publication. His landlord, Tessa's landlord, since Blake was on the lease, served an eviction notice citing the moral turpitude clause in their rental agreement. The local news stations picked up the story for their evening broadcasts, but it was the social media reaction that truly destroyed him. Seattle's mom bloggers and neighborhood Facebook groups shared the story with warnings to watch for Blake at schools, playgrounds, and community centers. His photo was posted with captions like child endangerer and predator alert. Someone created a fake dating profile using his photos with the tagline, "I throw children out of houses." Vic monitored it all from his office, feeling a cold satisfaction as he watched Blake's life systematically dismantle itself. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from Marcus, Tommy, and Rachel. Marcus, Target hasn't left the house all day. Neighbors are gathering outside with protest signs. Tommy, local mom bloggers are organizing a shame parade for this afternoon. This guy is about to become the most hated man in Seattle. Rachel, working on part 2 of the series. The name issue is bigger than we thought. The most interesting call came from Detective Rodriguez. Mr. Castellano, I wanted to update you on the criminal case. We arrested Blake Thornfield this morning on the child endangerment charges, plus the outstanding warrant from Portland. How's he handling custody? Not well. He's demanding a lawyer, but can't afford one. More interesting is that he's claiming his name isn't actually Blake Thornfield. Vic felt a familiar tingle, the sensation of a puzzle piece clicking into place. What's he claiming his real name is? Says he's Blake Thompson, and that Thornfield is an alias he's been using for the past 3 years. If that's true, it means he's been committing identity fraud on top of everything else. Any way to verify? We're working on it. But here's the thing. If he's been using a false identity, it calls into question everything about his background. His employment history, his certifications, his relationships, all of it could be fraudulent. After Rodriguez hung up, Vic immediately called Maria Santos. Maria, I need you to run a full identity verification on Blake Thornfield. Detective Rodriguez says he might be using an alias. On it. If this guy's been running a long-term false identity, I'll find a real one. 2 hours later, Maria called back with results that exceeded even Vic's expectations. Blake Thornfield is indeed an alias. Real name is Blake Anthony Thompson, age 31. Here's where it gets interesting. Thompson has a criminal record going back to age 18. Multiple arrests for fraud, identity theft, and domestic violence. He did 18 months in Oregon State Penitentiary for bilking elderly women out of their retirement savings. So he's a career criminal. Gets better. The domestic violence charges were from his relationship with the mother of his oldest child, the one in Portland. According to court records, he broke her nose during an argument about child support. She got a restraining order, which he violated 3 times before skipping town. Vic was taking notes, his mind already working through the implications. What about the Thornfield identity? Where did that come from? Identity theft. Blake Thornfield was a real person. Yoga instructor who died in a car accident in Nevada 3 years ago. Thompson stole his identity, moved to Seattle, and started fresh. All his certifications, his employment history as Thornfield, it's all fraudulent. Maria, you're brilliant. Can you document all of this legally? Already done. I've got court records, prison records, police reports, even the death certificate of the real Blake Thornfield. This guy isn't just a predator. He's a professional criminal who's been running cons for over a decade. Vic immediately forwarded the information to Detective Rodriguez, Harold Brennan, and Rachel Kim. Within an hour, the story had exploded into something much bigger than a local predator expose. Blake Thompson was wanted in 3 states for various crimes, and his arrest in Seattle was just the beginning of a much larger investigation. But the most satisfying call came from Tessa. Vic, you have to help me. Her voice was shaking, desperate. The police want to question me about Blake's identity. They think I might have known he was using a fake name. Did you? No. I swear I had no idea. But they're treating me like I'm some kind of accomplice. The media is camping outside my house. I lost my job this morning because they said I was a liability. My landlord is trying to evict me. Vic let the silence stretch, savoring her panic. Vic, please. Emma's my daughter too. You can't want her to see her mother destroyed like this. Emma's my daughter, Vic said quietly, and you handed her over to a violent criminal with a fake identity. You never bothered to run a background check on a man you let live in your house with my child. I didn't know. You didn't care. There's a difference. What do you want? Tell me what you want and I'll do it. Vic considered his response carefully. He could destroy Tessa completely. Her reputation was already in ruins, her finances were collapsing, and her association with Blake had made her radioactive in Seattle social circles. But there was something more valuable than total destruction. I want you to sign over full custody of Emma. Permanent, irrevocable custody with no visitation rights. The line went silent for a long moment. Vic, you can't ask me to give up my daughter completely. I'm not asking. I'm offering you a way out of this mess. Sign the custody papers, and I'll make sure the police understand you were a victim of Blake's deception rather than an accomplice. Refuse, and I'll make sure every detail of your negligence and poor judgment becomes public knowledge. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting my daughter from people who've proven they can't be trusted with her safety. Your choice, Tessa. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was broken. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours. Vic hung up and immediately called Harold to prepare the custody modification papers. By this time tomorrow, Emma would be solely and permanently his daughter, free from the chaos and danger her mother had brought into her life. Blake Thompson was facing multiple felony charges and would likely spend the next decade in prison. Tessa was facing social and financial ruin, with her only escape route requiring her to give up her daughter. It was almost enough. Almost. Chapter 6, The Noose Tightens. 22 hours later, Tessa signed the papers. Harold Brennan's office had never seen someone so thoroughly defeated. She'd lost 20 pounds in the past week. Her hair was unwashed, and her hands shook as she scrawled her signature across the documents that severed her legal connection to Emma forever. You realize this is permanent? Harold asked, fulfilling his legal obligation to ensure she understood the implications. You're relinquishing all parental rights. No visitation, no contact without Mr. Castellano's explicit permission, no claim to decision-making regarding Emma's welfare or future. I understand. Tessa's voice was barely a whisper. Vic watched from across the table, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret. This woman had endangered his daughter and then laughed about it. She deserved everything that was happening to her. After Tessa left, Harold poured himself a scotch despite it being only noon. I've been practicing family law for 30 years, Vic. I've never seen someone's life implode so completely in such a short time. She made her choices. Blake Thompson, sure. But Tessa, some of what's happened to her seems almost orchestrated. Vic met his lawyer's eyes. Consequences aren't always proportional to actions, Harold. Sometimes they're proportional to the damage those actions could have caused. Emma could have died that night. Harold nodded slowly. What's next? Because Blake Thompson is looking at serious prison time, and Tessa is basically a social pariah. Your daughter is safe. You have full custody. You've won. Have I? What more could you want? Vic was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. Blake Thompson has destroyed how many families over the years? 5? 6? And he was just getting started. Even with him in prison, there are other predators out there doing the same thing to other families. Vic, you can't save every family from every predator. No, but I can make sure this particular predator never hurts anyone again. He's looking at 15 to 20 years. Prison isn't permanent. People get paroled, charges get reduced, sentences get commuted. Blake Thompson is a career criminal who's spent his entire adult life targeting vulnerable women and children. He'll do this again the moment he gets the chance. Harold set down his scotch glass. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that some problems require permanent solutions. That evening, Vic had dinner with Emma at their favorite restaurant. She was happier than she'd been in weeks, chatting about school, her friends, a book she was reading. The custody agreement meant she wouldn't have to navigate the confusion and stress of visits with her mother anymore. For an 8-year-old, the simplicity was a relief. Daddy, am I going to see Mommy anymore? Only if you want a sweetheart, and only when you're older and can decide for yourself. I don't think I want to. She chose Blake over me. The statement was delivered matter-of-factly, without anger or sadness. Emma had processed the situation with the brutal clarity that children sometimes possess. Tessa had indeed chosen Blake over her daughter's safety, and now she was facing the consequences of that choice. After Emma went to bed, Vic made a series of phone calls. The first was to Detective Rodriguez. Detective, it's Vic Castellano. I wanted to ask about Blake Thompson's legal situation. Well, he's been charged with child endangerment, identity fraud, violation of restraining order, and failure to pay child support. The Portland DA is also filing additional charges for the domestic violence incidents. He's looking at serious time. How serious? 15 to 20 years if he goes to trial and loses. Maybe 10 to 12 if he pleads out. And then he's free to do this again. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Mr. Castellano, I understand you're angry, but the criminal justice system failed to prevent him from endangering my daughter because he was using a false identity that hid his criminal history. How many other Blake Thornfields are out there right now, targeting families? I can't answer that. I can. Maria Santos found evidence of at least 3 other false identities Thompson has used over the years. This isn't his first time disappearing and reinventing himself. And it won't be his last. The second call was to Marcus Webb. Marcus, I need a different kind of surveillance. I want to know everything about Blake Thompson's time in prison. Who he talks to, who visits him, what his plans are when he gets out. Vic, prison surveillance is complicated, expensive, probably illegal. I'm not asking you to bug his cell. I'm asking you to monitor his communications, his visitor logs, his correspondence. All of that is technically public record. For 15 to 20 years. For as long as it takes. The third call was the most important. Danny Reeves was a former Delta Force operator who now ran a very specialized consulting firm. His clients were typically governments or corporations dealing with problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. Vic had worked with Danny twice, once in Colombia, once in Eastern Europe. Both situations had involved permanently resolving threats to American civilians. Danny, it's Vic Castellano. Vic, Jesus, it's been what, 3 years? How's retirement treating you? Retirement ended when someone put my daughter in the hospital. Danny's tone shifted immediately. Talk to me. Vic explained the situation, Blake Thompson's criminal history, his pattern of targeting families, his use of false identities to evade law enforcement. He detailed the systematic destruction of women's lives, the children left traumatized and abandoned, the likelihood that Thompson would continue his predatory behavior after serving his prison sentence. So what are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to make sure Blake Thompson never hurts another family. That's a permanent solution, Vic. Some problems require permanent solutions. Danny was quiet for a long moment. This is personal for you. He threw my 8-year-old daughter out of a house at midnight in the middle of winter. She could have died. Kids involved changes the equation. What's your timeline? I want him to serve his prison sentence. Let the system do what it's designed to do. But when his release date approaches, whether that's 10 years or 20, I want him to disappear permanently. That's a long-term contract. Expensive. Money isn't an issue. It's not about money, Vic. It's about commitment. You're asking me to track a target for potentially decades, then eliminate him upon release. That's not a job. That's a crusade. Call it whatever you want. Are you interested or not? Danny was quiet for another moment. Send me the file. If Thompson is half as bad as you're describing, the world will be better off without him. After the calls, Vic sat in his office reviewing Emma's medical records from the hospital. The photos of her scratches and bruises, the documentation of her dehydration and hypothermia, the psychological evaluation that noted significant trauma consistent with abandonment and exposure. Blake Thompson had done this to his daughter, had laughed about it, had shown no remorse, no accountability, no recognition that he'd nearly killed a child through his negligence and cruelty. The legal system would punish him temporarily. Vic would ensure the punishment was permanent. Some sins were unforgivable. Some threats required elimination. Blake Thompson had made the mistake of targeting the wrong family. Chapter 7. The Long Game. 5 years passed. Emma was 13 now, a bright, confident teenager who excelled in school and showed no lasting effect from that terrible night behind the dumpster. She'd grown up knowing only stability and safety in her father's house, with no need to navigate the chaos her mother had brought into her life. Tessa had left Seattle 6 months after signing away her parental rights. Vic had kept track of her movements through Maria Santos, Portland first, then Los Angeles, finally settling in Phoenix near her parents. She'd never remarried, never had other children. The last report suggested she was working as a receptionist at a medical clinic and living in a modest apartment. Her social media presence was minimal, her life unremarkable. Blake Thompson was serving his sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Marcus Webb's prison monitoring had revealed exactly what Vic had expected. Thompson was planning his next con. He'd maintained correspondence with 3 different women he'd met through prison pen pal services, each believing herself to be his only contact with the outside world. He'd also been disciplined twice for manipulating younger inmates, demonstrating that his predatory behavior continued even behind bars. More concerning was Thompson's correspondence with his cellmate, Robert Vance, a white-collar criminal who specialized in identity theft. Marcus had intercepted enough communications to confirm that Thompson and Vance were planning to work together after their releases. Vance would provide new identities, Thompson would run the cons, and they'd split the profits while maintaining plausible deniability for each other's crimes. Danny Reeves had checked in annually, confirming his contract remained active and his surveillance of Thompson was ongoing. The timeline was still years away. Thompson wouldn't be eligible for parole until 2031 at the earliest, but Danny was a patient man who understood the value of long-term planning. Vic had used those 5 years productively. His security consulting business had expanded into a full-service firm specializing in protecting high-net-worth families from exactly the kind of predator Thompson represented. He'd developed comprehensive background check protocols, threat assessment systems, and response strategies that had prevented dozens of families from falling victim to financial and emotional parasites. More importantly, he'd used his resources and connections to quietly hunt down other predators operating in the Pacific Northwest. 3 men had been exposed and prosecuted based on intelligence Vic had provided to law enforcement. 2 others had simply disappeared after Vic's contacts had made it clear their behavior was being monitored. Emma knew none of this, of course. To her, her father was simply a security consultant who worked with important clients and traveled occasionally for business. She had no idea that Blake Thompson was still alive, still planning, still a threat that would someday need to be eliminated. On a rainy Thursday evening in November, Vic received the call he'd been expecting for years. "Vic, it's Marcus. We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Thompson's parole hearing got moved up. Instead of 2031, he's going before the board in 6 months. His lawyer is arguing good behavior, overcrowding, some new rehabilitation program he completed." Vic felt the familiar cold focus settle over him. What are his chances? Better than they should be. Prison reform advocates have been pushing for earlier releases for nonviolent offenders. Identity fraud and child endangerment don't carry the same weight as murder or assault. He's not nonviolent. His ex-girlfriend with a broken nose would disagree with that classification. That was in Oregon, different jurisdiction. The Washington charges were all classified as nonviolent crimes. Vic was already moving, pulling Thompson's file from his safe, reviewing Danny Reeves' contact information. What's the timeline if he gets paroled? Release date would be May 15th, 2026. 5 months from now. And Vance, released 3 months ago. He's living in Spokane under a new identity, David Morris. Already set up a fake identity production business disguised as a document restoration service. The pieces were falling into place exactly as Vic had predicted 5 years ago. Thompson would be released, would connect with Vance, would acquire a new identity, and would immediately begin targeting new victims. Within months, another family would be destroyed, another child would be traumatized, another woman would be left financially and emotionally devastated. Unless Vic stopped it. "Marcus, I need complete surveillance on Thompson's release plan. Where he's planning to live, who he's planning to contact, what his first moves will be." Already on it. His correspondence suggests he's planning to meet Vance in Spokane, get a new identity, then head to California. Apparently, there's a wealthy widow in San Diego he's been grooming through letters. Jesus. He's already got his next victim lined up. Gets worse. The widow has a 10-year-old daughter. Vic closed his eyes, seeing Emma at 8 years old, small and frightened in that hospital bed. Seeing another child who would soon face the same terror if he didn't act. "Marcus, cancel all other surveillance projects. I want every resource focused on Thompson until this is resolved." "Understood. What about the family?" "What family?" "Emma. If you're planning what I think you're planning, there could be blowback. Legal consequences. You need to think about her future." Vic had been thinking about Emma's future for 5 years. About her safety, her happiness, her ability to grow up in a world where predators like Blake Thompson couldn't reach her. Emma's future is exactly what I'm protecting. After Marcus hung up, Vic made 2 more calls. The first was to Danny Reeves. "Danny, timeline just accelerated. Target is likely to be released in May. I'll be ready. What's the preferred scenario?" "Clean disappearance. No body, no investigation, no connection to his past crimes or victims. I want him to simply vanish without a trace." "Understood. Payment terms remain the same. Triple them. This needs to be perfect." The second call was to Harold Brennan. "Harold, I need you to prepare something for me. A detailed legal document outlining Emma's care and custody in the event something happens to me." "Vic, what's going on?" "Just contingency planning. If I'm ever unable to care for Emma, travel accident, health issues, whatever, I want ironclad documentation of who becomes her guardian and how her finances are managed." "Who are you naming as guardian?" "My mother. Elena's fully recovered from her stroke. She's only 73, and Emma adores her. Second choice is my sister in Colorado. Harold was quiet for a moment. This isn't about travel accidents, is it? It's about making sure Emma is protected no matter what happens. Vic, whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything illegal, Harold. I'm just ensuring my daughter's future is secure. It wasn't technically a lie. What Danny Reeves would do to Blake Thompson wouldn't be Vic's direct action. And Emma's future truly was what mattered. But as Vic sat in his office that night, reviewing Thompson's file one last time, he knew that some decisions carried permanent consequences. He'd made peace with those consequences 5 years ago, the moment he'd held his traumatized daughter in that hospital room. Blake Thompson had sealed his fate when he'd thrown an 8-year-old child into a winter night and laughed about it. Everything that had happened since, the investigation, the imprisonment, the surveillance, the planning, had been inevitable consequences of that single moment of cruelty. In 5 months, Thompson would walk out of prison believing he'd served his time and paid his debt to society. He'd connect with his criminal partner, acquire a new identity, and begin hunting his next victim. He would never reach her. Some threats required permanent elimination. Some predators couldn't be allowed to hunt again. Blake Thompson was about to learn that some fathers never forget and never forgive. Chapter 8. The Final Calculation. The parole hearing took place on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Vic sat in the gallery, watching Blake Thompson, clean-shaven, wearing a borrowed suit, projecting the image of a reformed man, present his case to the board. Thompson spoke eloquently about his rehabilitation, his remorse for his past actions, his commitment to making amends and living lawfully. It was a masterful performance. Thompson had always been an excellent liar. The parole board deliberated for 2 hours before announcing their decision. Parole granted, with release scheduled for May 15th. Thompson would serve the remainder of his sentence under supervised probation, with requirements to maintain employment, submit to regular drug testing, and avoid contact with his previous victims. Vic watched Thompson's face as the decision was announced. For just a moment, the mask slipped. The expression that crossed Thompson's features wasn't relief or gratitude. It was predatory satisfaction. The look of a hunter who'd successfully convinced the sheep he was harmless. After the hearing, Vic followed Thompson's transport van back to the prison, then drove to a truck stop 20 miles away where Danny Reeves was waiting. "He's out in 2 months, Vic said, sliding into the booth across from Danny. "I saw. My contact inside says he's already made arrangements to be picked up by someone calling himself David Morris. That's Vance, his identity theft partner." Danny nodded. "I've been tracking Morris since his release. He's good, very good. New workshop, legitimate front business, high-quality documentation. If Thompson gets one of Morris's identities, he'll be virtually untraceable through normal channels. But not through your channels. Nothing's untraceable if you know where to look." Danny pulled out a tablet and showed Vic surveillance photos of a man in his 40s working in what appeared to be a document restoration shop. Morris runs his operation out of a legitimate business in Spokane. He's got 3 employees who don't know what he really does, and he takes on just enough real restoration work to justify the equipment and the business license. How does the identity creation work? Birth certificates of deceased infants, Social Security numbers from people who died young and never established credit histories, driver's licenses from states with lax verification requirements. By the time Morris is finished, his customers have complete life histories going back decades. Danny swiped to another photo showing Thompson and Morris in the prison visiting room. They've met 6 times in the past year. Based on the correspondence we've intercepted, Thompson's getting an identity package that includes a California driver's license, credit cards, even a partially established credit history. The new identity has already been created, waiting for him. Marcus Morrison, age 33, born in Nevada, relocated to California for work. Clean record, good credit, the whole package. Vic studied the photos. Where's Thompson planning to go first? San Diego. He's been corresponding with a widow named Catherine Walsh. 45 years old. Husband died in a car accident 2 years ago. Left her with a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-figure insurance settlement. The familiar cold fury settled in Vic's chest. He's already groomed her. 18 months of letters. Started with a sob story about being wrongly imprisoned, gradual escalation to romance. Promises to take care of her and her daughter when he gets out. Classic long con setup. What's the daughter's name? Sophie. 10 years old. Homeschooled. Shy according to Thompson's intelligence gathering. Walsh posted photos on social media before Thompson made contact. He specifically targeted her after seeing pictures of the daughter. The implications made Vic's stomach turn. Thompson wasn't just targeting another wealthy woman. He was specifically targeting a family with a vulnerable child. The homeschooling meant fewer outside observers. The recent loss of father figure meant emotional vulnerability, and the insurance settlement meant substantial financial resources to exploit. Danny, I want this finished before he reaches San Diego. That's the plan. Thompson will be picked up by Morris on May 15th, driven to the identity handoff location, and then Danny made a subtle gesture. Disappearance between Spokane and the California border. No witnesses, no evidence, no body. What about Morris? Different problem, different solution. Morris will be too scared to ever report Thompson missing, and too smart to ask questions about what happened. He'll assume Thompson decided to disappear on his own, which is exactly what his clients sometimes do. Vic nodded. It was a clean plan, professionally executed, with minimal risk of exposure. Thompson would simply vanish, leaving no trace and no connections to his past crimes or victims. What do you need from me? Final payment and final confirmation. Once this begins, there's no stopping it. Vic pulled out an envelope containing $50,000 in cash, the balance of Danny's fee. Consider this final confirmation. Danny pocketed the envelope without counting it. One last question, Vic. You're sure about this? Because once Thompson is gone, there's no undoing it. I've been sure for 5 years. As they parted ways, Vic felt a strange sense of completion. 5 years of planning, surveillance, and preparation were coming to an end. In 2 months, Blake Thompson would cease to exist, and the threat he represented would be permanently eliminated. That evening, Vic had dinner with Emma at their favorite restaurant. The same place they'd eaten the night she'd learned she wouldn't have to see her mother anymore. Emma was excited about high school starting in the fall, chattering about course selections and after-school activities. Dad, can I ask you something? Typed on Thompson's typewriter, signed with his handwriting sample, postmarked from Nevada. She'll be disappointed, but not suspicious. Catherine Walsh and her 10-year-old daughter Sophie would never know how close they'd come to being destroyed by a predator. They would never experience the trauma Emma had endured that night behind the dumpster. Sophie would never be thrown out of her house in the middle of winter by a drunken stepfather who laughed about her terror. They were safe because Blake Thompson no longer existed. Danny, this concludes our business arrangement. Understood. It's been a pleasure working with you, Vic. The world's a better place without that particular problem in it. After Danny hung up, Vic sat in his office for a long time, looking at Thompson's file. 5 years of surveillance reports, criminal records, victim statements, and planning documents. Evidence of a career criminal who'd spent his entire adult life destroying families and traumatizing children. Now it was just paper. The threat it represented was gone. Vic fed the entire file into his shredder, watching years of documentation disappear into confetti. When the last page was destroyed, he emptied the shredder bin into a trash bag and carried it out to his car. The remains would be burned in his fireplace that evening, ensuring no trace remained of his connection to Blake Thompson's disappearance. At dinner, Emma was unusually quiet. Everything okay, sweetheart? I had that nightmare again last night. About Blake and that night. Vic studied his daughter's face. She was older now, more mature, better able to process traumatic memories. But the scars from that night would always be part of her, just as they were part of him. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel completely safe. Like, what if there are other people like Blake out there? What if they target our family again? Vic reached across the table and took Emma's hand. Sweetheart, there will always be bad people in the world, but they won't hurt our family. I won't let them. How can you be sure? Because I'm your father, and protecting you is the most important thing I'll ever do. There's nothing I wouldn't do to keep you safe. Emma squeezed his hand. I know, Dad. I've always known that. That evening, After Emma went to bed, Vic built a fire in his fireplace and burned the shredded remains of Thompson's file. As the paper turned to ash, he thought about the choices he'd made, the lines he'd crossed, the man he'd become. 5 years ago, he'd been a law-abiding citizen who trusted the legal system to protect his family. Then Blake Thompson had thrown his 8-year-old daughter out of a house at midnight and laughed about it. The legal system had responded with supervised visitation and a sentence that would have eventually freed Thompson to victimize other families. That hadn't been enough. Not nearly enough. So Vic had become something else. Something harder, more ruthless, more willing to cross lines that others respected. He'd become the kind of father who didn't just call the police when his child was threatened. He'd become the kind of man who eliminated threats permanently. He regretted nothing. Thompson had made a career of destroying families and traumatizing children. He'd shown no remorse, no accountability, no intention of changing his behavior. He'd been planning to do it again the moment he was released from prison. Now he was gone. The world was safer without him in it. Emma was safer. Catherine Walsh and her daughter Sophie were safer. Every potential future victim was safer. As the last of the paper burned to ash, Vic's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dad picked me up from soccer practice today. Says he's taking me to Disney World next month. Can't wait. Love, Sophie. The text was clearly meant for someone else. Probably a wrong number or a misdirected message. But the timing felt like cosmic confirmation that he'd made the right choice. Somewhere in San Diego, a 10-year-old girl was excited about a trip with her father, blissfully unaware that a predator had been targeting her family. She would never know how close she'd come to experiencing the same trauma Emma had endured. She would grow up safe and protected, with a childhood unmarred by the kind of terror Thompson specialized in inflicting. That was worth everything Vic had sacrificed to make it happen. The fire burned down to embers as Vic sat in his chair, watching the last traces of Blake Thompson disappear into smoke and ash. Tomorrow, he would return to his normal life, running his security business, raising his daughter, living quietly in Seattle. But he would never again be the man who trusted the legal system to protect what mattered most. He would never again assume that prison sentences and supervised probation were sufficient responses to threats against his family. Some fathers were content to let others decide the fate of their children's predators. Vic Castellano was not one of those fathers, and he never would be again. Of course. Do you ever think about Blake? The guy who you know? Vic was careful to keep his expression neutral. Why do you ask? I had a nightmare about that night last week. First one in a long time. I was just wondering if he's still in prison. Yes, he's still in prison. Will he ever get out? Not for a very long time, sweetheart. And even if he does, he'll never be able to hurt you or anyone else again. Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Good. I know it sounds mean, but I hope something bad happens to him. People who hurt kids should get what they deserve. Out of the mouths of babes. Emma had unconsciously articulated the same principle that had guided Vic's actions for 5 years. People who hurt children should face consequences proportional to the damage they could have caused. Thompson had nearly killed an 8-year-old child through deliberate negligence, then laughed about it. He'd spent years destroying families and traumatizing children. He was planning to do it again the moment he was released. He deserved exactly what was coming to him. As they drove home, Vic made a mental note to increase security around Emma during the coming months. Danny Reeves was a professional who'd never been connected to any of his previous work, but eliminating Thompson would be the end of a years-long operation. Loose ends needed to be tied up. Contingencies needed to be addressed. Emma's safety remained the highest priority. Everything else was secondary. In 63 days, Blake Thompson would walk out of prison for the last time. He would never reach his intended victim. He would never hurt another child. Some fathers were content to let the legal system handle their family's threats. Vic Castellano was not one of those fathers. Chapter 9, The Last Sunset. May 15th arrived gray and cold, typical Seattle weather that matched Vic's mood perfectly. He stood in his office at 6 a.m., watching the sunrise through the window while holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Emma was still sleeping. She didn't have school for another 3 weeks, and 13-year-olds were notorious for sleeping late during summer break. His phone buzzed with a text from Danny Reeves, "Package ready for delivery. ETA 3 p.m." Simple words that meant Blake Thompson would be dead by sunset. Vic had spent the morning reviewing security protocols for Emma one final time. His will and guardianship documents were updated and filed with Harold Brennan. His business affairs were in order. If anything went wrong, if Danny's operation was somehow compromised, if Thompson escaped, if there was any blowback, Emma would be protected and provided for. But nothing would go wrong. Danny Reeves had been eliminating problems for 20 years without a single failure. Thompson was just another problem that required a permanent solution. At 10 a.m., Marcus Webb called with the final surveillance update. Target was released on schedule, picked up by David Morris in a blue Honda Civic at 8:47 a.m. They're currently at Morris's document shop, finalizing the identity transfer. How's Thompson's mood? Confident. Relaxed. He's acting like a man who thinks he's gotten away with everything. He has gotten away with everything. That's the problem. Not for much longer. Danny's team is in position along the route to California. Clean intercept point about 40 miles south of Spokane. Isolated highway. No traffic cameras. What about cleanup? Handled. Thompson will simply disappear. Morris will assume he decided to lay low for a while, which is normal behavior for his clients. When Thompson doesn't make contact with the San Diego target, she'll assume he changed his mind.